Kia ora te whānau iho karaiti. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 23rd of October, which is Luke chapter 18 verses 9 through to 14. Jesus told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, will not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. I want us just to picture the difference for a moment. We've got the Pharisee standing at the front in the blaze of light, standing where he can be seen by all, congratulating himself, telling himself and telling God what a wonderful person he really is. And the tax collector, standing perhaps just inside the door, way at the back, not even sure that he should be there, not sure that he's got enough, that he's holy enough, overwhelmed by his own sense of unworthiness. Which one is us? Which one is me? Both of them. That's what I've realized, depending on the day. It's easy to imagine, isn't it, that God is always looking for a perfect performance from us. Every time. And I know that's been the story of my life. Always trying to avoid making mistakes, getting things wrong, messing up. Spending huge amounts of energy into being good. And yet, constantly missing the mark, and as a result of it, beating myself up with it. I can see both of these people very much part of me. It's so easy to become self-satisfied. When we're in a good patch, we might have had a good patch of days or weeks or even months, when we've had no significant crises, certainly not within our awareness, and we're unaware of our own failings. The reality is that when we're in that space, it's easy, isn't it, to spot the faults in others. And we're so often willing to give ourselves a mulligan, you know, that false shot in golf where you just don't let it count because it was a silly one. And I know it with myself. I know how easy it is when I'm driving along multiple lanes and somebody comes up on the left lane and cuts in on me, and there's always this sense of and it may not be outwardly expressed, but I'm always aware of it, and for the next while as I'm trailing along behind this person who's has cut in on me, there's always this kind of inner sense of I wish they hadn't done that. And yet when I do it, there's a flash of thought, I probably wouldn't have liked it if it was somebody else who did it to me. But this is me. I'm entitled. They've got to get over it. So the question is, how do we see ourselves? How do others see us? How does God see us? And so, for myself, I'm aware that I can be charming, witty, and insightful. And you know, it's taken me a long time to accept that vision of myself, that can be true. I've always struggled. Why about people liking me? And it's taken me quite a while to accept that kind of image. Just why shouldn't people like me? And so I'm surprised when people do like me, because I'm also aware of how difficult I can be. Especially when I'm in a meeting or an unfamiliar environment for the first time and I'm expecting things to be difficult. And I know that I'm perceived as mercurial, as erratic, as unpredictable, and at times potentially quite disruptive. And that I tend to see differently. I so often have a perspective which is quite different from the people who are around me. All these things I'm aware of as being potentially problematic. Yet here's the thing, I can also secretly be quite proud of them. And I'll just admit that to you up front. I know it's there, I'm aware of these things that are within me. And yet I can also be very surprised and hurt when I discover other people's animus towards me. I still remember a case of a man who'd had resented me for 24 years for saying things 24 years ago that had long gone out of my awareness, that he was still wounded by. And he had some real reason to hate me. And it was a real wake-up for me. I certainly would not want to hurt the guy in any way today, and I don't think I did at the time. Yet we come across in a way that often is quite different from how we imagine. And so I've come to a point in my life where hopefully for the most part I take little for granted. I'm a messed up mixture of both of these characters, of the Pharisee and of the tax collector. You know, guilty as charged. And my hunch is that many of us are. And this passage invites us to be aware of the contradictions within us, the contradictions that we are. There's a story I love to tell that I was listening to a morning report years ago, 9 to noon, national radio. It was Tony Campolo, a well-known American, being interviewed by Linda Clark. And Tony Campolo had been a spiritual advisor to Bill Clinton. And so she was pressing him about Bill Clinton's peccadillos, his foibles, his moral failings. And she said, "You evangelicals say love the sinner and hate the sin." And Campolo laughed. He says, "That's not what Jesus says." He says, "Jesus says, love the sinner and hate your own sin." And he's absolutely right. If you've heard me tell the story before, I apologize. Love the sinner and hate your own sin. Before you remove the speck from somebody else's eye, take out the log from your own, says Jesus. Be aware of what's going on within you. The truth is that only Jesus, only God, sees the whole of us. Sees us as we really are. Now, I've just been trying to play with this technology, so I'm going to put something up on the screen now, which took me a while to work out how to do. I know a 10-year-old would have worked it out in half a minute. But here it is. This is a thing which is called the Jahari Window. Now, it was created by two psychologists by the name of Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham, hence the Jahari Window, or Jahari. It sounds more sophisticated. I'm not sure of the correct pronunciation. But what we can see in this is that it's a picture of us. And we've got a horizontal axis, and at the very top we can see there that there are things about us that are known to ourselves and things that are not known to ourselves. And on the vertical axis there are things that are known to others about us and things that are not known to others about us. So let's look at the top left quadrant. It's the things that we know about ourselves and that others know about ourselves. This is the open area or arena where everything is kind of in public view. And then on the top right, there are things that others know about us, but that we don't know about ourselves. This is our blind spot. This is the things about us that we're absolutely oblivious about, but others can see as plain as the nose on our face. And sometimes I suspect they might laugh behind their hands when we just don't get it, when we don't see things about ourselves that is obvious to everybody else. We go down to the bottom left quadrant. These are the things that are not known to others, but are known to us. This is our hidden area or facade. This is where we put on masks. This is the place where we keep secrets from others, where we pretend to be what we're not, and others don't see us as we really are. This is the hidden area or facade. And then on the bottom right, there's that part which is not known to others, and it's not known to ourselves either. And I've heard this part often described as the bottom part of the iceberg, you know, the 90% that is below water. All the rest is the stuff that sticks above the water. But this large part, this unknown part, the things that others don't know about us and we don't know about ourselves, is the bit that is only known to God. The truth is that God knows all of us and all about us, and He accepts and receives us just as we are. So we see the tax collector in the story. The tax collector knew he wasn't perfect. He knew, in fact, that he was far from perfect. He knew he had a long way to go. He was always, constantly confronted with his own shortcomings and felt wretched about it, particularly before God. The Pharisee, on the other hand, is blind to his imperfections on this day anyway. And it may be that the next day, having experienced failure, having experienced some humiliation, he may have returned to the temple chastened, with an awareness that he wasn't as great as he cracked himself up to be the day before. The point is that we should not, I want to suggest, not that we should be dwelling on our failings, but that we do need to be aware of them. That we are all vulnerable, every one of us. We all make mistakes, we all stuff up, we all do dumb things, we all do things that are less than worthy, and need to be aware of our need of grace. In this story, it happens to be the tax collector is aware of his need of grace. And more importantly, that grace is always available to those who will seek it. It was a tax collector who went home this day justified rather than the other. Grace is always available. This is the good news in the story. Grace is always available to those who will seek it. Amen. God bless you.